So I've just kind of put this in a context in order to go into the next realm of Islam, which is called Ihsan, because it is probably, of all the teachings of Islam, the most forgotten. And traditionally, it went under the category of what is called, in the West, Sufism. Or, in the Muslim world, Tasawwuf. The Arabic term literally means to wear wool. The idea was that some of the early peoples wore wool as a type of declaration of their position in the world. Wool is not a very comfortable garment. It's kind of a rough. And so the idea is that there was kind of I'm going to deal with the world, in a sense of just dealing by really giving it up, in a sense. And so there's an idea of zuhud, or doing without, or giving up. But the fundamental, I think, aspect of tasawwuf is related to this idea of ihsan. Now, in the hadith, the Prophet, peace be upon him, is asked by Jibreel, tell me about ihsan. And he says, ihsan is to worship God as if you see God. And if you do not see God, you know God sees you. This is seen within the Islamic framework as the highest level of human possibility. You now are an individual who is in the divine presence. Because of that, your actions are no longer checked by outward social mechanisms. There is an internal mechanism that is working within the human psyche that is going to prevent you from doing that which will take you to your destruction. If you want to look at it in materialistic terms, you could see it as always really interesting. There's a guy here in New Mexico. He was driving with everybody else about 80 miles per hour. They saw one of the New Mexican police, and everybody slowed down except this guy. He just kept zooming along at 80 miles per hour. Cop turns on his light, pulls him down. He said, why didn't you slow down like everybody else? He said, I didn't want to be a hypocrite. Right? The idea is that why is it that in the presence of authority, suddenly our actions are checked? Why is that? What's going on in the human psyche? Well, punishment. I don't want a $300 speeding ticket. There's one motivation. Reminder, oh God, I'm speeding, and there's the authority. He reminds me. That's probably a smaller percentage of individuals, but I'm certain there are some people that, wow, I'm really going fast. They see the police officer, and it reminds them of their actions. So there are many things going on, right? This idea of being checked from the outside is related to what anthropologists term shame cultures. Right? Anthropologists divide cultures into shame and guilt cultures. And they have an idea that guilt cultures are higher. Like the Western culture would be seen as a guilt culture. Many African cultures would be considered shame cultures. A guilt culture is a culture where there's an internal mechanism going on. I feel bad if I'm doing wrong. A shame culture is a culture where, oh my God, so-and-so's seeing me. He's going to tell so-and-so. In other words, there's an external mechanism that's checking my actions. From the Islamic viewpoint, Islam is a shame religion, but it is not the society that you want to check your action. It is the fact that you are being watched by God. And this is why ihsan is related to seeing. In other words, you feel the presence of God and you feel ashamed before God to be doing an action that would be displeasing to God. This is the idea of shame. And the Prophet said, every tradition has a characteristic, and the characteristic of my tradition is shame. But it is not shame before the society, it is shame before God. And one of the things is that the Prophet said, feel shame before the angels. That there are angels, there's an angelic presence that when we do things. And many people, it's interesting, but many people are ashamed. They do things. I had a friend who worked in a video store, and he was telling me how people that came in for pornographic films would always use these euphemisms. When they would ask to where the section, if they couldn't find it, or do you have these things, right? And he said that he could see that a lot of times they would walk around and they'd be embarrassed to come up and just say to them, because there is a sense of shame. There's still within our culture certain mechanisms in the culture that people feel shame about certain things. And one of them would be that. I mean, there are many examples of that. And we're a culture also that in many ways is throwing off the garments of shame. I mean, we're losing that sense too as the Christian influence in this culture, the Judaic Christian influence in this culture diminishes. So, if you look at the root of this word here, ihsan, it is literally to make beautiful. To make something beautiful. And it's interesting about the three words of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. They're all on the same form in the Arabic language. I told you there were 15 verbal forms. They're on the fourth form, which is a doing, making something happen. So Islam is making submission happen. You are making it happen. Iman is making faith happen. You are making it happen. Ihsan is making beauty happen. Now here's an idea. There's an ethicist, an American ethicist, Chisholm, who his ethical theory was that ethics is nothing other than aesthetics, that ethics is really a branch of aesthetics. In other words, that an ethical act is a beautiful act. And this is why people recognize it. You know, what a wonderful thing that person did. That was a beautiful thing to do, right? There's an idea, there's a recognition in the human being when they see an act of an ethical act done, that it impresses them. There's something congruous about it, right? The person that brings the money back, there was too much money given in the change. That's something that, you know, it surprises people nowadays. Hey, thank you, like that. It's a shock. Well, there's an idea there that there's a harmony, that something's incongruous. There's something that is not harmonious that occurs in an unethical act. And that what an ethical act does is it returns that harmony to the act itself. Now the word is hasan, comes from hasan. Now the interesting thing, there are many ways to say beautiful in Arabic. And one of them is jamal. And we talked about that, jamal and jalal. Jamal. Jamal, now does anybody know the Arabic word for camel? Camel? Jamal, right? Camel is from Jamal. Because the Egyptians say gamal. They pronounce the jim gamal. So when the Europeans first heard it, they heard gamal, camel, right? So camel is from jamal. Jamal, in the Arabic language, when you say hiya jamilatun, she's beautiful, what you're saying is her nose is beautiful. Because the Arabs, if you look at a camel, it's got a very beautiful nose, right? So for the Arabs, the beauty of the camel is the nose, right? Hasan relates to the eye. When you call somebody Hasanul Hay'a, they have beauty, it relates to the eye. Husna is beauty in the eye. You see, the Arabs have many, many words. They're very specific language, right? There's a word for a table that has food on it called ma'idah. If it doesn't have food, it's called khawan. So they get very specific. So Hasan relates to the eye. Now it's interesting that the idea of ihsan is seeing. There is an idea that the human being recognizes beauty, that we are beauty recognizers, that there's something within our neurological or spiritual or psychosocial character that recognizes beauty. But it is not enough, according to the Islamic tradition, to recognize beauty. You must also be a beauty producer. You must be contributing yourselves. This can only occur with spiritual development. Now, the Muslims would say some people are born with pure hearts. The traditional Muslim scholars say there are some people that are born with good hearts. They don't need a lot of work on their hearts. They have a type of selfless nature. They will prefer, they will give, they will do these things. Now, a materialist might look at these things very cynically, right? In fact, there's a principle in philosophy called the hedonistic principle, which is that people really only do good things because it makes them feel good. So there's a type of pleasure that one derives out of doing good things. And this is the way many people will interpret a good act, that they're really doing it for themselves, right? From the Muslim point of view, that's not really, it's almost irrelevant. That, in other words, that the idea of doing good, that if you do feel good, that is something that God, that is another divine mechanism that would encourage one to do this. And the Muslims would say that really, in a sense, that a person will not be fulfilled in life until they become somebody who is a muhsin. If you look throughout the Qur'an, again and again, you will come to this idea of Allah loves the beauty makers. Allah loves the muhsinin. Allah is with the muhsinin. Many, many verses that deal with this idea of ihsan. If you look at the Muslim world traditionally, and I think also many aspects of the Christian world, of the Chinese world, you will see a desire to embellish, a desire to make something beautiful. From the Muslim point of view, that is a spiritual organ in the human being, which is manifesting in the world. And so the idea of building a mosque that is not simply a place of worship, but also there is something aesthetic. When the individual enters into the sacred space, they recognize something beautiful about that. And it can be in simplicity. It doesn't have to be this massive ornamentation. No, it can be quite simple. One of the really interesting things about the modern Muslim world is that you will notice that there is almost an absence in much of the modern Muslim world of this type of beauty. It's quite sad. Plastic, these plastic wall things to hang on your wall that have Qur'an on them. In where Sidi Abdullah comes from, this Mauritanian man, they drink out of wooden bowls, but they always carve designs on the wooden bowl. It's not simply a bowl. You don't just make it a bowl. It's a drinking bowl. So they put things that are pleasurable to the eye. They have pillows there, and these are very primitive in terms of how they're living. They have these pillows that are made out of leather, but the women design these really incredibly beautiful patterns on the pillow. So the pillow is not just functional, right? The Bauhausian type of just functionality, right? That has something essentially ugly in its nature. It's more than functional. It is also life-enhancing. It embellishes one's life on earth. Now, what you will notice in the modern world is the absence of that often. Plastic. The idea of, tea, traditionally, Japanese tea ceremony, part of the experience was the awesome aesthetic qualities to it, right? The pot itself, the way the pot is turned, the way the cups are, the way they're offered to the person. These are all aesthetic aspects of the culture that when it's just, you put in your quarter, push the button, it comes out, and then, and then you got this paper sugar, pour it in there, swish it around, yeah, I've satisfied my caffeine crave for the moment, right? There's a loss of aesthetic experience in that, right? Completely. It becomes reduced to simply a bestial need being fulfilled, right? In other words, the human content there, which is deeply related to an aesthetic experience of life. It's something that makes us human. It's something that transcends our bestial or our worldly qualities and places us in the otherworldly realm. We transcend, right? And this is something we recognize. I had my two boys, I was with Hakeem, we were out, incredible place in Yosemite Valley, right? It's just so beautiful. And they were playing in the creek, and they both, 5 and 3 years old, but they both had these Ninja Turtle underwear on. And I said, that underwear looks so incongruous. Right? It just was aesthetically, it was ugly, wasn't it? You were there with me, Hakeem. So I went and I took their underpants off, and I let them play around naked, and it was beautiful, right? In other words, it was very interesting. Why is that? What is it in ourselves that we recognize that when we see it? You're walking along, it's a beautiful view, and suddenly you see a Coke can, and it kind of crushes the heart. It's ugly. Not only the can, but the act that put it there. There's something incongruous there. There's something that really stirs us up. What is that? From the Muslim perspective, it is our desire for ihsan. We desire to make beautiful. The highest act of making beautiful is to be in the divine presence. That is the highest act. That when you enter into the sacred space, when you are aware of the divine in the world, it becomes difficult to rape and pillage the world you live in. It becomes difficult to turn a creek into a polluted, foul-smelling entity. It becomes difficult to mass-produce things that will end up in a few weeks in the garbage can or a few years, you see. And the ancients really had a sense of this. And this is why the things they made last to this day. We have them in our museums, right? And we go and we look at that. What is that in them that wanted to create that? That is this desire to make beautiful. And the hadith says, God is beautiful and He loves beauty. And this is why God loves the beauty makers. Because they are being godlike. They are taking on divine qualities.